everyone, and welcome to the Becoming an Empowered Parent online series, offering expert tools for embracing imperfection, building connection, and creating more peace and joy within your family. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm your host, Debbie Zeichner. I'm a parent coach, a mindfulness facilitator, and a licensed clinical social worker. And I am so excited and thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Chris Willard. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. It's so good to be back. It's so good to see you and reconnect. This is great. It's always such a wonderful summit. Yeah.
It's awesome. And, you know, Chris and I was so fortunate. I had been following Chris's work for so many years, and I was so excited to be able to have the opportunity to meet him in person when he came out to my kiddo's school to give a parenting talk last year. So it was so nice to be able to meet you in person. And now it's so nice to be able to reconnect, as you said.
Absolutely.
So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So before we dive in, I just want to let you all know a little bit more about Chris. So Dr. Chris Willard is a psychologist and educational consultant based in Boston, specializing in mindfulness. He has been practicing meditation for 20 years and has led hundreds of workshops around the world with invitations to more than 24 countries. He has presented at TEDx conferences, and his thoughts have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, mindful.org, and elsewhere. He's the author of Child's Mind, Growing Up Mindful, which I have here, Growing Up Mindful, Raising Resilience, and 8 other books for parents, professionals, and children, along with 6 sets of cards and therapeutic games available in more than 10 languages. So amazing. And Chris teaches at Harvard Medical School. So again, welcome, Chris. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, it's so fun to be back. It's always such a good experience with you.
Oh, I love that. So let's begin by, so we know a little bit more about you now professionally. Tell us a little more about you personally, your story, your journey, and really how you got into this work.
Absolutely. And I actually really love this question. And I've been in this work of mindfulness, from a personal level for 20 years and teaching it for almost that long. And then I've been in kind of the parenting side of things from writing books for 10 years, but then only being a parent for 5 years. So maybe just like throw away my first couple of books. But this actually started, I just sort of my own experience growing up. Like I never like heard the word mindfulness, right? Which is, so kind of trendy and common now, but so many of us have these really sweet experiences growing up. Like I just remember being out in nature, right? Looking at the clouds in the sky with my dad, just walking quietly in the woods, things like that. And so I really feel like this stuff was kind of planted, the seeds were kind of planted in me as a kid. And actually,
Sure.
I really think sharing mindfulness with kids is less about teaching them mindfulness than really kind of drawing out the mindfulness that's already there. I mean, you just look at any 2-year-old, I could even look into my backyard right now and just watching my daughter just like exploring the world with her senses, with beginner's mind and no preconceived notions, and then culture kind of comes in and stress comes in and the worries of the world come in, and the way that we as parents deal with things well or don't deal with them so well starts to come in and impact our kids and impact their outlook, and as well as other caregivers or the larger culture or big events also start to shape our kids' lives too that are out of our control, and this starts to add up. Right? For some kids, we think about this as adding up as ACEs, right? Adverse childhood events, and other kids just, shapes them in different ways.
Sure.
And so for me, I had a, pretty standard childhood and, without a lot of that kind of stuff, but I went off to college and, after a kind of stressful high school experience and pretty challenging undergrad experience, like I just really started to struggle and fall apart. And we know the kids are just under so much stress these days, right? Whether it's the amount of work that they're getting, or whether it's thinking about climate change, or whether it's thinking about pandemics, or whether it's thinking about, gun violence, right? There's just so much on their minds. And then we're asking them to work, and we're asking them to make friends and do better than, exceed your parents' expectations in the face of a challenging economy. And so there's just so much pressure on our kids, and we as parents are not always modeling that as well as we could be. And so our kids don't learn those skills. And I, again, I had great parents, but I didn't learn how to care for myself very well. I went off to college and I really started to struggle with depression, struggle with anxiety, really, really struggling with substances. And that's why I took some time off from college. And sometimes when you take time off from college, they say you're finding yourself, and sometimes they say you're getting your shit together, right? I'm not sure which it really was, but the first
It's a
year was
little bit of both.
definitely neither of those. That first year, was a total mess. And then my parents basically dragged me on this mindfulness retreat. This is in 1999, and it was just so transformative for me. It was like suddenly I was happier. I felt, that kind of like happiness I'd felt when I was a kid walking in the forest or being at the beach. And I felt connected with the people around me and really connected to everything in the world. Not on drugs, feeling connected to people in the world. And it was just so transformative. And from there, I got sober, and that was, 20 years ago, and was happier, healthier. And it really began my journey kind of back into the world. And I spent the next year actually getting myself together, actually really pursuing a mindfulness practice, both formally and informally, really inspired by folks like Thich Nhat Hanh, Jack Kornfield, Jon Kabat-Zinn, a lot of those teachers. And it really did, it just changed my life so much that I knew I just really wanted to share this with other people. The way a lot of us, I think, once we taste that raisin for the first time, once we try that mindful walking or notice our breath for real, like suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, I want everyone to experience this. And that's where it got started for me. And then kind of stumbling into, I was a teacher for a few years, and then I'm a psychologist by training now. And as I said, a parent now too, and just really wanting to, as our world gets busier and busier, crazier and crazier, to me, it makes sense that mindfulness is kind of rising at the same time as all this crazy multitasking and everything is arising at the same time. And so I just feel so lucky that I was able to kind of ride that wave and stay with it and continue to have opportunities to try to share this practice with myself, with my own kids, with other people, with other parents, because it's so much of what we need in the world right now.
It is so much what we need. And thank you so much for sharing your background and your journey and your story with us. And I think just having experienced that as a young adult yourself, and now having that opportunity to bring that into your own parenting life must just feel so incredible.
Oh my gosh. I'm so grateful. To have 20 years of practice under my belt before I became a parent. It's just, it's still hard, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But just to be able to have some of that equanimity and some of that just more perspective, and be able to come back to my breath, to come back to my body when I'm losing it, or when my kids are losing it, or when my wife is losing it, right? But to be able to know that I can just come back with mindfulness and so many other, kind of related practices, gratitude, all these things just help so much during, the crazy
during those crazy times.
Right.
Yeah. And we're definitely going to dive into that, because I want to hear some specifics for you. And I know many of our viewers will want to hear, what do I do when I'm losing it with my kids, or what do I do when my kids are losing it? And, what are just, so we'll talk about some of that. And before we do, and I told you I was going to read this. As I mentioned, I had attended a talk that Chris was so gracious in giving a few years ago. And he has this quote, which I love, and I still think of it all the time and use it all the time in my work. And so I'm going to read that. Chris said, "The best way to create stressed out, miserable, checked out kids is to surround them with stressed out, miserable, checked out adults. But the best way to create mindful, present, compassionate kids is to surround them with mindful, present, compassionate adults." So Chris, can you speak to that a bit? Tell us a little bit more about that, and that this powerful way of thinking and that shift in our perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first started in this work, I mean, with the arrogance of youth, as well as the, excitement of the recently converted, it was like, oh, I'm gonna teach kids to breathe, and there's gonna be world peace in 5 years, and it's gonna be amazing, and like pretty soon, it's like, kids are not interested in this, and I feel like a failure, and all of that, and obviously, we haven't developed world peace. And like what I really realized was, again, to kind of go back to Thich Nhat Hanh, who's just been such an inspiration for me.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about teaching kids mindfulness as like planting seeds.
Yep.
And I think like, well, if it's, and he says, we don't know what's going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, what is it that allows seeds to grow? And to me, it's like, well, it's rainwater and it's sunshine and it's good soil and fertilizer. And so what might those be in a child's life? And it's like, oh, the parents are the sunshine and the teachers are the rainwater and the soil is like the schools, the communities, right? These other networks that we're all a part of. And so, when we want to be sharing mindfulness with kids, where we really want to start is with ourselves, right? If we, and so, what starts to happen over time is that kids see this in us. They're drawn to us when they see, again, if there's professionals watching, right? The therapist who doesn't lose it, the teacher who doesn't lose it, right? And kids certainly like the parent who doesn't totally lose it, right? And then we're like modeling that for the kids, that we're not getting so rattled by whatever it is. And maybe we even like kind of fake that a little bit. Like, I mean, obviously it's best if we're able to, and first of all, we're not going to be able to be perfect at every moment. We're human beings, all of us, right? But like, I mean, the story I've been telling a lot lately is I drive my son to school, and there's this one awful traffic light near our house where we always get stuck. And it's like, oh, are we going to wait? Are we going to make it? We all have that traffic light.
We all have that traffic light, yeah. Yes. We have one, we call it, my kids call it the snoring light.
The snoring light, absolutely. So like, here's what I start to do with the snoring light that we have on the corner of Alpine and Concord Avenue, right? Yeah. Is like I pull up to the light and it's like red, and I sit there and like my son's in this car seat in the back. I'm like, oh, there's a red light, traffic. Like, well, I'm going to just see how many breaths it is till this light changes. Let's just count how many breaths, how many hot chocolate breaths, right? Breathe in, smell the hot chocolate. Breathe out, cool it off, or like, whatever, 7-Eleven breaths. And, so now it's like become this thing, he's 5, he's gullible, right? So it's like, now it's like we get in traffic going anywhere and he's like, Dad, there's traffic. Can we do some breaths? And I'm just like, yes, right? So because amazing. Again, it's like, now he associates traffic, not with like dad being grumpy and dad being stressed out, which he does sometimes, right? Because dad still loses it, right? When we're late sometimes.
Of course.
But that, it's like kind of this fun thing now. And well, what else can we do but breathe anyway at the stoplight or when there's traffic? So like these kinds of little things start to trickle in. Or that like we do, in the mornings, we like pick a little, growing mindful card and do a little practice together. And I let him ring the bell sometimes and lead me in a practice and see who can listen the longest. Like these kinds of things. And my 2-year-old then kind of like listening and then crawling away and, whatever she's doing. But like, this is how it starts to then internalize for kids, as well as just noticing, these other things that we do. And again, not in every moment, right? But that like, we're not totally losing it. Like the kid is losing it, like he'll lose it, but I'm not, snapping quite as quickly, right? That I'm able to be with him through that difficulty so that I can reconnect. And like, I can't remember what I kind of spoke about last year in the summit, but, one of the things I just am so interested in is the way that kids actually learn how to self-regulate with their emotions, right? Manage big emotions and that kind of thing, is they don't have the prefrontal cortex to do that yet until they're much older, right? They need an adult to do that for them when they're babies, to do that with them as they get older, right? Of course, we like soothe the baby, we hold the baby, right? This is what helps them to settle down. And then over time, we have to keep doing that in some ways as our kids get older, right? This is called co-regulation. right? Interpersonal neurobiology, our mirror neurons are kind of firing, our physiologies are aligning with each other, attuning to each other, so that as we settle down, they're settling down. Then ultimately they start to grow. They've learned how to do this themselves. And hopefully they don't need us, although we kind of always want them to need us, right? But at the same time, right? And then it's that it's okay to have conflict. Like, we're going to have conflict with our kids. Like, when they're 5, they're going to want to eat 12 Oreos or watch another show. You know, when they're 10, they're going to want more Minecraft. When they're 15, they're going to want a new bedtime. When they're 20, they're going to cross from college with more money, right? There's always going to be conflict. The point is not that conflict is bad. Conflict is okay. It's actually how we grow, right? How do we resolve the conflict? How do we come back together? How do we model, hey, you know what? You're not getting a later bedtime. You're not getting another half hour of Minecraft, but like, we still love each other. We can still come together after that, right? And then kids learn how to do that with their friends, with their intimate partners, with their kids, hopefully someday. And so the speaker I saw about a year ago was saying, how we grow, how our kids grow is oh my gosh, now I'm going to try to, how am I going to remember this? Right? It's like, connect, tear, and repair. Kind of over and over again. We connect, and then there's a tear, and then we repair. And then we all grow stronger when we've repaired in a really healthy way. I've grown stronger. My child has grown stronger. Our relationship has grown stronger after that repair. And then they go on to be able to do that in their other relationships, because there's always going to be some degree of conflict there. But the more I can be well regulated myself as a parent, the more, when the kid's having a tantrum, when my patient, you know, because again, I work as a clinician also, is totally losing it. When I'm trying to guide a group of 5-year-olds in mindfulness, if I'm doing a school visit or something like that, or working with a teacher, right? The more I can stay calm and centered and present through that, you know, then there's some hope of being able to co-regulate with that child, and they can start to, you know, really learn how to settle themselves, regulate themselves back down again too. And again, that's always best case scenario, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think everything that you said, you know, it really is about planting those seeds. And I think even as we learn more about this, the importance of modeling, and how, you know, the parents I work with, I say, you know, it's probably one of the hardest pills for parents to swallow, is this idea that it really does truly start with us. You know, as much as we'd love to be able to say, no, it's my child's problem, it really is about looking at ourselves, right? And developing that self-awareness, which I really see as such a beautiful opportunity that we have to grow and to evolve and to truly guide our kids into becoming the people that we want to see out in the world, right? I mean, we have such, and we know that, right? And so I think that planting seeds, even as you said, you know, I love how you said, you know, sometimes we have to fake it, right? And I always say to parents, you know, sometimes you got to fake it till you make it. I mean, I even say things to parents like, you know, sometimes I really encourage parents to like make little mistakes around the house, you know, knock over a glass of water, like, oh, silly me, no big deal, right? Just to be able, because our kids are always listening, they're always paying attention, right? Like, they learn how to manage and regulate their emotions by how we manage ours, which is hard because we don't always manage them so well. And that's okay. We're human, right? So, so they're learning from that. And I always think, you know, giving them those alternatives. So I love that, the stoplight breaths, right? And just like an alternative, wait, so I don't have to get all mad and frustrated when something doesn't go my way. I can breathe. Oh, that's right. So it's, and as you said, bringing up the prefrontal cortex and developing those pathways within the brain over time, I think also helps us develop those pathways in our brain, right? Like we're
give us a great practice opportunity for that.
Yes, and our biggest teachers. So what would you say, Chris, what does being an empowered parent mean to you? What does that look like? What does that mean to you?
I mean, I think to me, it means, you know, that we feel, I mean, we're never in control, you know, of anything. We're certainly not in control of our kids.
Right.
But I think that we're feeling like really empowered in our life, that our emotions are not ruling us, and that our kids are also not ruling us. Not that we're ruling our kids or ruling our emotions, but that we're really empowered in our lives to be making the decisions that we want to make. That it's not being ruled by our own childhood issues, and the buttons that are installed by our parents that our kids are then pressing, right? That it's not being ruled by our own emotional reactions, not being ruled by our own, fears, which are based in caring for our kids, of course, right?
Of course.
And not being ruled, I think, also by like our own inner critic, which I think, again, as parents, like this to me is where self-compassion is so powerful in parenting, that it's like, you don't have to be the perfect parent. Like you just have to be good enough, right? That's what, the research says. That's what, Winnicott said, going back to the old psychoanalysts, like, and so being empowered is like, no, like I'm kind of driving the bus here, not my critical voice, not my own childhood, nor my kids either. But, I'm driving the bus. I don't know what's coming on the road, but hopefully I can steer my way around it. And I think to me, that's what being empowered is. And I think like you said that thing about mistakes, and there's this that wonderful study, I can't remember where it's from, of like teaching parents and teachers to make mistakes on purpose in front of their kids.
Yes.
And then doing that healthy and positive self-talk. Because when our kids see us beat ourselves up for spilling the milk, or getting mad at ourselves when we burn the dinner, or whatever it might be, that's just pouring water on the seeds of their critical voice. And I learned recently that critical voice starts around like age 8 or 9. I didn't know this till recently, but that voice that's like, you're not a good enough parent, or you're not popular enough, or you're not a good therapist, or, you're not good looking, or you're the worst soccer player, right? That we all have, I want to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of us parents, all of us adults, all kids. When I tell that to teenagers, that blows their mind. They're like, wait, everyone has that?
Wow. Yeah.
Right? You don't have to believe everything you think, right? That's the other beautiful thing about mindfulness, is like, that's just a thought that you're a bad parent. That's just a thought. Maybe it's true. I doubt it. Like, that's just a thought that, you're an unpopular kid, or that you'll never get into college, or you'll never get a prom date, or whatever it is. And so like, learning how to recognize that critical voice and not have that critical voice run the show, keep us afraid to do things, that when we're criticizing ourselves and the next words out of our mouth are criticizing our own child in a way that we then feel terrible about, but we have too much pride to then, be able to apologize and reconnect and repair with our child after that moment. Like, I think that to me is being empowered, being, confident enough also to know that we make mistakes and we're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Like, we can repair with our child after there's been a rift, and we can repair with ourselves and our partner, if we have one. So, that to me, I think is what empowerment really, really is. It's not control, because we don't have that, but yeah.
And I love what you said about self-compassion, because so much of this series and summit is really about, how do we embrace imperfection, right? And so much of that tends to come up when that inner critic shows up, right? So what have you found to be, what do you talk with parents about when they notice their inner critic showing up, when they notice themselves feeling really triggered, right? Which oftentimes can go hand in hand. What are some ways in which you manage that, even in your own parenting or with parents that you work with, kind of managing that?
I think just beginning by recognizing that this voice is not you. I think we want to have compassion for that voice, because often it does actually, in a sense, want the best, and it's just acting out of fear, right? And recognizing to some extent also where it comes from. So again, some of us, it's like been installed by our own parents, that, like, I'm not good enough at this, or, I know my own parents would be disappointed in me that I gave the kid an extra 10 minutes of screen time or whatever. Sometimes it's from the larger culture that says to everybody, but I think, I just, want to acknowledge, like, particularly for women and mothers, I think they get that a lot more than we dads catch breaks, I think sometimes. But there's such a cultural message for moms in particular around, you're not doing a good enough job. And once we can kind of see that voice is not us, or that voice is kind of a larger part of the culture, or that voice is our own parents or grandparents, or our own, kind of cultural tradition, or maybe some not so nice teacher or something we had along the way, that can really empower us in knowing that it's not me. And then I think also, a kind of classic practice that comes out of acceptance and commitment therapy, which some people might be familiar with, is like writing down some of those critical voices thoughts, like that it tells you, like, I'm the worst parent in the world, like I'll never amount to anything, or my kids will never, or I'm too much of a pushover, or I'm too harsh, or like just writing those down, and then in front of them just writing down like, I'm having the thought that I'm the worst parent in the
Mhm.
world. I'm having the
Mhm.
thought
Mhm.
that,
Like
right?
externalizing that, right? That this is a
Exactly.
thought. It's not
Yeah.
who we are. Yeah, I
Right.
love that.
Right. Right. Those
Absolutely.
are empowering, and those are empowering to do with our kids too, to be like,
Yeah.
what's on your top 10 playlist, as like Pema Chodron might
Mhm.
say, right? Like, we've all got them.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that can be empowering to kind of take the driver's seat back to some extent too.
And Chris, I just wanted to mention one thing that I think is something else that I love so much about mindfulness is that we all, as you said, we all have this inner critic. We all go to these places that just, it's not, creates so much guilt and so much shame. And
Yeah.
I think that what I personally love so much about mindfulness, because sometimes it's hard, sometimes I know for many parents that I work with, that chatter, that critic is so relentless that it's almost, they don't know anything else. And
Yeah.
so I think what is so special to me personally about mindfulness is being able to really connect with our bodies, right? To be able to notice I know, like for me, what slows me in my tracks is when I can actually remember to check in and say, God, why is my jaw so tense? Or why is my, and then to be able to say, oh, wait, and then to be able to go to that place of, what have I been telling myself? Right.
Yeah.
Which then follows all
Yeah.
those beautiful steps that you've just shared, I
Right.
think is just really what can be so transformative
Yeah.
for us. And then all of that certainly has that experience, that benefit for our children to be able to witness that process and share
Right.
that.
Right. Right. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing if our kids grew up with even just a little bit less of that critical voice that we all have in our own minds, right? Like,
Yeah.
what a gift.
So, Chris, I know we're beginning to near the end of our time together. I'm just wondering, firstly, if you have any kind of parting words of wisdom for those who are watching, just as they're kind of thinking about their own journeys and how they're, all of us are just really trying to do the best that we can with the
Yeah.
skills that we have. But any parting words of wisdom, any ways that you found to be really beneficial for yourself as a father, as a parent, how we can best show up for our kids? What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think, you know, physical presence as well as, emotional
Yeah.
presence, of course.
Yeah.
And I think just, really kind of engaging with our kids. I mean, one of the things that's been so fun is just trying to be as creative as possible with my kids. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, but like making stuff together, and that doesn't have to go away as kids get older. But really making, especially in, I think, our kind of more secular world, I think there's a lot of room for that we miss as a culture, that maybe spiritual traditions have provided in terms of like ritual, and structure. And so like really taking things like, like maybe we do or maybe we don't observe the Sabbath in some way for, our different spiritual backgrounds, but like that we keep a real sacred family day together as long as we can, where we're not on our phones, where we're not being distracted, where we're just absolutely trying to be as present as our kids want us to be, which maybe they don't always want us to be present in the exact same way. Or that we're, maybe we don't say grace around the dinner table, or maybe we do, but we do practice gratitude in talking
Mm,
about, things that we feel positive about at the end of the day, and sharing that as a family. And as I like to say to parents, like, practicing mindfulness together, things like that. And as I say to parents too, like there'll be the day that the kids, like, they roll their eyes, or my, kid is, he's already sometimes like, breathing is boring, dad, and it's like, but he still does it, like if I ask him what he's grateful for, you can't ask someone a question and they don't ask themselves that question at the same time. Like, it's a little trick. Like if you ask someone a question, they'll have to ask themselves that question, whether they choose to answer it out loud or not.
Yeah.
So it's still like planting that seed. It's still watering that seed. And so don't give up. Best
Yeah.
advice my parents' therapist ever got was, about when I was kind of a mess, was don't give up. And I think I
Yeah.
actually
Yes.
start one of my books with that. Thank you, Dr. Weiss, who told my parents don't give up, on me. So, just don't give up, either, and just have fun, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do our best. Thank you. So I know that you are being just so gracious and generous in offering a free gift for our viewers. I'm wondering if you want to briefly share with us what that free gift is. And then after you share that free gift, can you please let everybody know where they can find you, how they can follow the incredible, incredible work that you're doing. You guys, all of you have to, especially those of you with young kids, have to check out the many children's books that Chris has. Alpha Breaths is one of them. I know you have a new one, Breathing.
There's Alpha
The
Breath.
Alpha Breaths you have. But you have a new one.
I do. Yeah. So actually, the free gift is Alpha Breaths related. You can actually get a PDF printout of all the Alpha Breaths as little cards. You can then kind of be flashcards in the morning or around the table. And then I do meet all ends of the spectrum. Actually, a new book I'm working on is about mental health for college kids, because there is, believe it or not, Debbie, there is not a book on that topic, which is horrifying, because that is a group that is struggling tremendously with mental health issues. That's not going to be out for a couple of years, but that's my next project. And then this just came out by the time you're watching this, the breathing book, which is really fun and kind of inspired for little kids by like Press Here and those fun books. It's got just lots of different fun activities. But you can also stay in touch at my website, drchristopherwillard.com, drchristopherwillard.com. And find my newsletter there, which I don't send out stuff too much, but I do occasionally. And then I've been doing on Instagram and Facebook, which is also Dr. Chris Willard, just daily challenges. So like January was daily challenges around eating, and February around relationships, and then April kind of inspired by kids' books, and nature-oriented challenges, work-oriented challenges. So every day, just a little reminder, a little thing. Yeah. So those are hopefully fun for people to follow along with as well. So it's at Dr. Chris Willard. So hopefully I'll see you there, and I hope everyone does stay in touch. But yeah, it's always such a treat to speak with you, Debbie.
Oh, you too, Chris. Thank you so much. I so appreciate your time and value your contribution. I know that there's so much goodness that we talked about today, and I really just encourage all of you who are watching today to really, once you hit stop and you have some time, to really let this talk that we had today land, and really think about the words that Chris offered, and think about some of your biggest takeaways that you want to take from this particular session, and just kind of let that be. So Chris, thank you again for joining us and for being here. And thank you to all of you for being here and for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for another day of the Becoming an Empowered Parent Summit. So bye for now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.